Put on a suit. Drink water. Don't drink and drive.
Game over!
Take it light. Stay.
Now you're more fluent.
Makina, he's got three!
Up, Bears. So this is really good right here. Absolutely. Let's do it.
Welcome, everybody, to the Creator Hour. This is Ori B from Hoop Social. We have an extraordinary episode for you. We have a very special guest. We are going to be talking NBA predictions. We're going to be playing a little peek for peek. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the GM survey as well. So here we go to the Creator Hour. Let's go.
Get your popcorn ready, it's a show you can't miss. Welcome to the Creator Hour, where legends reminisce.
All right, guys, we are back with Creator Hour. This is episode 21. I am excited to have you guys with us. We have a special guest today, Mr. OG, Mr. Chilltown Hoops himself. I am super excited to intro him later. But to start, I do want to talk a little bit about the GM survey that went on in the NBA. They interviewed 50 GMs, got a lot of information, a lot of data. You have to take these things with a grain of salt. Obviously, sometimes the data kind of gives you an idea of what almost the audience feels to a certain extent. I feel like you kind of get a view of all the best players, the best home courts, the most efficient offenses. They ask a lot of different questions, and it's interesting to see where people fall, especially compared to maybe the general consensus. Now, some of the more interesting things in the GM survey, I have to say, were things like the Philadelphia 76ers. The Philadelphia 76ers got the most votes to be second in the Eastern Conference. And Paul George actually was voted as the most influential move by anybody in the offseason. And to me, that's extraordinarily interesting. I know to my guest that's going to be interesting because I know he has some interesting thoughts on the 76ers and where they're headed. But to me, it seems sometimes these GMs might be a little out of touch with some of their answers. And sometimes it seems like there's kind of like this conformity where you're like, okay, I get it. I mean, we're at a point where, I mean, the best shooting guard in the league, arguably, wasn't even an honorable mention. And that's something that we might get into later as well. But it just kind of shows that there's some fallible people in these positions, and not all GMs know everything about the league. And though this may be a good way to get kind of a temperature reading, it isn't necessarily the most influential data when it comes to fans' view of the league. So you have to take this with a grain of salt. Like I said, interesting stuff, the GM survey is. We might talk a little bit about some of that more later, but I do want to get into things with my guests. So we do have Mr. I call him OG. I'm in all his lives all the time. I call him OG. You guys know his Chilltown Hoops. Let's bring him to the stage. Here we go. Chilltown, how are you doing today, sir?
What's up, my man? How you doing? What's going on?
I am doing very well. I appreciate you coming through.
Absolutely, brother. No problem. No problem. It's interesting I actually get to talk to you in this kind of setting because I'm usually talking to you with a line of people behind you, and we kind of got to that sort of thing. Like, I don't really feel like that today. I feel like we can actually have a basketball conversation. I think that's cool.
That exactly. This is a long time overdue, I think,
Yeah.
because we have had some fun conversations privy to this. So absolutely. The first thing I get into with all my guests, no matter who they are, is a little bit about their journey and being a content creator, and what kind of brought you where content creation kind of became a big deal to you.
Right.
What was your journey like to this point?
I was not a social media guy. I was very adamant about not being a social media guy. I didn't have a Facebook. I didn't have Snapchat, Instagram. I don't any of that stuff. I was not a part of that at all. And my best friend to this day, his name's Roderick. This is in 2020. Yeah, maybe 2000, late 2020. He's like, yo, you know anything about TikTok? And I said, no, I don't. I'm not on social media. I don't know anything about it. He's like, my kids love it. Yo, you should check it out. He said, I'm religious with it. I get on it in the morning for about an hour. So I said, all right, I'll check it out. Not really being serious about it. I just want to poke my head in there and see what it is. And I get to scrolling on it one day, the first time I checked it out. And this guy talks about the Chicago Bulls in the early 80s, in the mid 80s, I'm sorry, when they had Jordan, and in the 85-86 season when they had Jordan and George Gervin, that, you know, Jordan had help. He was on a really good team. And I was like, no, he wasn't. That's just not true. I was there and they were awful. I ended up stitching the video and talking about how he wasn't that good. Well, that video turns into it gets 10,000 views or some nonsense like that. And the next thing I know, it goes from that to what kind of rebounder was Moses Malone and how good was Karl Malone? And I got to explain that now. And who is Alex English? And I got to explain that. Next thing I know, it goes from 10,000 views to 100,000 views. And all of a sudden I'm OG. Like, wait a minute, what happened? How did we get here? And that's what it's been ever since. And I met Tone. That's how I met Tony. So that's how we got involved.
That's a wild ride for such a short period of time, really.
Yeah.
I mean, what was that like to really, I mean, you're a celebrity in that community, so it must be kind of an interesting feeling to be that way.
I know celebrities, and I'm not a celebrity. I'm just a guy that talks basketball. I don't really take myself that seriously. There's a bunch of people who do. I'm not one of those people, and I never looked at it like that. I just was a guy who just talked basketball. So, you know, I've always kept myself in that kind of space where, you know, I never got too big for my own britches, but, you know, I never not took it seriously, whatever I was doing. So, you know, the idea of me being a celebrity is like, really? I mean, I could go to the grocery store. I could go to the gas station. So I mean, I might get approached every once in a while. Hey, but not a lot. So I'm not a celebrity more than I am just a dude who talks basketball on the internet. That's all.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I mean, it seems like your goal in the first place was kind of as an educator, you know, somebody that really felt like people weren't getting the right information in the league.
Yes.
So do you think educating has been kind of a big deal for you?
Yes. I mean, I taught English and history in high school, and I've always felt like, you know, there's a difference between being a coach and being an educator. I mean, I don't have the patience to coach. That's just not my thing. But in terms of education, I mean, I definitely want to be educated. I definitely want to learn about people. Don't have me out here talking about something and I don't know what I'm talking about. No, put me on. I need to know exactly what it is that I'm talking about. And if I see somebody that's got their information wrong, all right, well, let's clean that up. Let's get to the bottom of that. So you can now know exactly what it is you're talking about. And not in a disrespectful way, but more of a, okay, this is what it actually is. I don't know where you get your information from, but that's just not true. That's not true at all.
Yeah, I appreciate that because it kind of comes with a sense of a genuineness about it. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't come off like you're playing a character as much as you're just trying to speak objectively.
Right. So when I talk to people about like Alex English, or when I talk to people about, you know, the game in the 80s or the 90s, I'm not necessarily dismissing what's going on today, because I love the game today. I love what the game has turned into. These young guys. I'm a huge Anthony Edwards fan. I think Donovan Mitchell's the best two guard in the game. I'm very much in tune with what's going on today. But the only reason why I'm in tune with what's going on today is because I know what went on in the past. I don't think you can do that unless you know what the past was, what the history of it is. I talk to a lot of people. That's probably why I get as frustrated as I do, is because a lot of these people that I talk to, particularly young people, you know, they think the NBA started when they started watching. Like there was a guy before the guy that you love. So whenever I talk about Anthony Edwards, for example, when I say that's Mitch Richmond right there, that doesn't mean that he is Mitch Richmond. No, I think That's who he reminds me of when I see him. I'm like, wait a minute. That's Mitch Richmond right there, except a better athlete. When I watch his game, I see a lot of the stuff that he reminds me of him. It's like I've always felt like this. Like it's like a girl. This girl doesn't look like this other girl, but when you see her, like she reminds me of somebody. That don't necessarily mean that she's that girl, but you remind me of Sandra or somebody like that. And that's kind of where I am with a lot of these younger players. You remind me of this guy. I don't think you are that guy. You remind me a lot of that guy.
That wasn't it Usher that told us that you remind me like that could be a big deal, you know. So
Yes,
I get
exactly
that. I
that.
get that.
Yep.
And that's interesting because people have, I feel they dig their heels in and get upset when you make comps like that
Yeah.
because they think that you're trying to demean the player by comparing it with a 90s player because they don't understand that 90s player. They know the 2K version of Mitch Richmond. They
Right.
don't know what a dog Mitch Richmond was. They don't know
Right.
that that's a compliment.
Right. And when they see him immediately, oh, he would have destroyed Mitch Richmond. Like, wait a minute. I didn't say he was better than him. I didn't say
Right.
Mitch was better than him. I didn't say that at all. What I did say was, you remind me of this dude. I remember seeing this dude. I grew up watching this dude, and you remind me of him. When I see you, that's who you remind me of. That doesn't mean that, he would have kicked your ass or you would have kicked his ass. No. Now, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of guys that I have seen that I'm thinking to myself, he would have kicked your ass. No question about that. Yes. Like I'm on record saying it. I will die on that hill. Anthony Edwards, Clyde Drexler would have bust your ass. Yes, he would have. And I will die on that hill. You couldn't have done anything with him. He would have destroyed you, no doubt about it. But with that being said, that's not a disrespect to the young fella. That's just how good Drex was. That's all that is. That's all that
That's
is.
people don't understand how good Clyde Drexler was.
That's
They
all.
that's all. That's all. It's not meant to be offensive. And I feel like maybe you have a better read on it than I, because obviously you're a lot larger account, but there's a certain level of toxicity in the
Yep.
NBA TikTok community. And how do we kind of navigate those waters? And how do you navigate those waters?
Well, my tolerance for nonsense is very low. I don't have a lot of tolerance for nonsense. What I do have a lot of tolerance for is people who want to be educating. People want to actually have basketball conversations. People who want to talk. We aren't going to agree on everything. My grandmother told me when I was a kid, if we agree on everything, one of us shouldn't be here. So we're not going to agree on everything. There's going to be some things that you say that I don't agree with. There's going to be some things that I say that you don't agree with. With that being said, if we could come to a common ground in terms of respect, then I don't see where the issue is. And when I talk to people, when we have conversations about this dude being better than that dude, or how do you feel about, like, when you ask me what's the issue with Jason Tatum's game and why is he the player that he is, and why do people talk about him the way they talk about him, and why do they talk about Jaylen Brown the way they talk about him? And there's a lot of people who have a disdain for Jason Tatum. Well, all right, let's talk about it. Let's talk about why you don't like him. One of the main reasons why you don't like him because he played for the Celtics. That's one of the main reasons why you don't like him. It's not because of his game. It's not because of how awesome he is. It's because he plays for the Celtics. And on top of that, they're winning. So if he didn't play for the Celtics and he played for Detroit and they were at the top of the East, you'd be rooting for him all day long. If he played for the Trailblazers, you'd be rooting for this guy all day long. But the fact that he plays for the Boston Celtics, who've been, quote unquote, the privileged franchise for all of this time, and they have him, well, it's again the haves having it again. So we all hate Jason Tatum, when I have never heard a guy who, with the game that he's had, with the accomplishments that he's had. Ori, I don't know if you know this, but he was the only first team All-Pro on the Olympic team. He was the only one. Meanwhile, there's nobody. Meanwhile, he can't get off the bench. I've never heard that anywhere, ever. This not only was he the first, not only is he the only first team All-Pro on the Olympic team over the last 3 years. First team All-Pro. Took his team to the NBA championship. Didn't shoot it very well. Okay, sure. But did the other things and expanded his game. He sucks. He's awful. I bet if he did that while he was playing for Phoenix, you guys would love him. But the fact that he plays for the Celtics, the fact if he played for the Knicks, if he played for the Celtics, you guys would be like, the hell with this guy. We hate him. And that's why, and that's what it is more than anything. Instead of appreciating what we're seeing here. I mean, we got a guy who, I think we're going into year 7
Mhm.
I mean, I think we're looking at a guy who's going to ultimately have over 25,000 points. I think he's going to play a lot of years. He looks like he takes great care of his body. His
He does.
game has expanded. I think that we're in a space with him where he probably is who he is. And what I mean when I say this, Ori, is a lot of people, they get on me when I say the 5 year logic. What I mean when I say the 5 year logic is when you see a guy by year 5, I mean this is probably who this guy is. What I mean when I say that is you're gonna get some better seasons. If a guy is, let's say, 23 and by year 5, he's 23, 6, and 5. This is probably who he is. Now, maybe in 2 years, you might get 28 and 7. That's not who he is, though. Who you saw in year 5, that's probably him. And the reason why I come up with that is because I've seen guys in the past. Steph Curry. If Steph Curry retired today, over the course of his career, he averaged 24, 6, and 5. In year 5, Steph Curry averaged 24, 5, and 6. Michael Jordan, in year 5, he averaged 32. He averaged 32, I think 8, and 7. By the time Jordan retired, he was 36 and 6. So this is probably who he is. Now, you're probably gonna get some better seasons, but this is what you should expect moving forward. That doesn't mean that you're not gonna get better years. That doesn't mean that. This is probably who this guy is. It's not gonna, okay, he's this. Oh, wait a minute, he's this. And then wait a minute, he's this. No. You're gonna get better. You're gonna get some better seasons. I saw Bird. Bird is another prime example. Bird in year 5. Bird was 23. Bird was 23, 10, and 6. Bird ended his career. He was 24, 10, and 7. It's probably who he is. Now, in 1988, Bird was 29, 9, and 8. So 29, he was 29, 10. I'm sorry, 29, 10, and 7. Is that who Bird is? No, you're not gonna get that every year from Bird, but he was better. But this is what you saw in year 5. That's probably who he is moving forward.
Makes sense. So that being the case, not to get too far off here, but we that means we kind of have an idea of what Tatum is, and is what Tatum is something all time great if he extends what it is. It has to be, right?
Absolutely. I definitely think. Now, this is the problem that we're having when we think all-time great. The conversation immediately goes to guys like James, Jordan, like Jabbar. Well, wait a minute, you could be an all-time great and be in a different tier. I do think that Jason Tatum, by the time his career is over, he's going to be an all-time great Celtic. 100%, I do believe that. Is he going to be as good as James one day? I don't think so. No, I don't think he's going to be that good. Pardon me. I don't think he's going to be that good. Is he going to be as good as Bryant? That's another reason why people hate him. 1, he plays for the Celtics. 2, he kind of tailored his game after Bryant, and I don't think he's that good, and I don't think he'll ever be that good. That doesn't mean that he can't be awesome, but people hate him because Bryant ain't around no more. So it's like, oh, you trying to be like Kobe? No, that's not it. That's just one of his. That's his idol, and he's trying to master his game. But I don't understand why that's a problem. I don't.
I know.
I don't understand why that's a problem.
To knock. Yeah.
I don't get. But to answer your question, yes, I do think he'll be an all-time great by the time his career is over. I don't want to look that far down the road though when it comes to him.
No,
because I mean he's 26 years old. We're in year 7. I'm not sure if we've seen the best of him yet. I'm not sure of that. And what I mean when I say that is, like when the game starts slowing down for guys, you can see a better version of them, even when the game starts to slow down for them. And because of that, right, and because of that, they look better. And a guy like Jason Tatum, I mean, I think he's gonna. I think this season coming up, I think he's gonna be fantastic this year, and I think the Celtics are gonna be great.
I think everything's pointing in that direction. That GM survey, everybody was, all aboard the Celtic train, and I think that's for good reason. I mean, they did everything appropriate by locking everybody back up, so it's hard not to be all aboard that. That's speaking of that's a perfect segue. I wanted to get your opinion on the Eastern and Western Conference a little bit while we had you here, and kind of go through some of the teams and just get kind of your feel for everybody a little bit and everybody moving forward, because I'm interested in what you think the the teams are going to actually look like.
Right.
Because right now on paper, sure, Philadelphia looks great.
Mhm.
Philadelphia looks fun. We both know that's not how you win ball games. We both know we should all be skeptical of the Philadelphia 76ers. They're
Mhm.
one of the first guys I want to talk about because the GM survey put them second in the East. Do you think that's too high, and why is that too high?
It doesn't have to be too high off the strength of Joel Embiid, because I think Joel Embiid is good enough not to be the best team in the Eastern Conference. I think he's good enough to take his team to the NBA championship and win it. I think he's that good. My issue with Joel Embiid is I think he's made of glass. That's my problem. And it's always been that with him. And that's hampered his game ever since he came into the league. When a guy is slowed down or hampered by injury, their confidence isn't what it is when they're feeling at their best. And that's off the strength of them knowing what their body is. So a guy like Joel Embiid, who can't move like he'd like to be able to move and do the things that he'd like to be able to do, he can't do that. So now when I'm looking at the Philadelphia 76ers and I look at their roster and I look at what they have with Kelly Oubre, the fact that they let Buddy Hield walk, I didn't have a problem with that off the strength they got Eric Gordon. So you got another knockdown shooter. I think Maxey is going to take another step this season in getting better. When I look at this unit overall, the signing of Andre Drummond was huge. I don't think many people talk about bagging Andre Drummond because a glass cleaner like that, and a presence like that in the paint. He's not a great defender, but a rebounder like that, that's going to be big in the playoffs. The fact that he can't make free throws, I think that could hamper him. But if we're being honest, if you could use him, Nick Nurse is smart enough that he could use him in certain situations. So when I look at the 76ers and I look at what they have, and now you're going to add Paul George to this lineup. The problem we're having, Ori, is Joel Embiid's going to break down, and people are going to ask now Paul George to be the number one. He already told us, I'm not a number one on the championship team. He already told us that. Now, can he hold it down while Joel Embiid goes out of the lineup? It depends on when we're asking him to do that, because he's getting a little long in the tooth. By the time the playoffs start next year, he'll be 35 years old, and I think that we're asking a lot of him. And the signing, I think that these GMs are looking at that because it looks good on paper. I think that's as far as I'm going to go with that.
Now, do you, not to get too Philadelphia ridden here, but do you think the signing of Paul George could potentially put the damper on Tyrese Maxey's progress?
No, I don't. And
Okay.
the reason why I don't is because I think that offense has a lot to do with him having the ball in his hands. Paul George playing off the ball, Maxey being a better shot creator and distributor this season with Nick Nurse's offense. I think he's going to be able to set Paul George up. Paul George is one of the better spot-up shooters on the wing in the league, especially at the break. He's one of the better spot-up shooters in the game. So I think Maxey's going to do a good job in getting him involved in that way. But I think that with a guy like Paul George, I think that does open up the offense a little more because he can spread the floor. And the fact that he can spread the floor and Maxey's ability to get downhill, plus Joel Embiid playing in the mid-range, I think that all of those things point to Tyrese Maxey being so much better.
Awesome. Well, that'd be good for him because I think his evolution is important for them to take a
Yes.
step forward as well. Yeah,
Yes.
for sure. Now, the GM said the most exciting team to watch is the Indiana Pacers.
Mhm.
Indiana Pacers made it to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. Obviously, that kind of surprised everyone. What do you think is kind of the ceiling, the floor for this Indiana squad?
I think they take a step back this season because they're not sneaking up on anybody. And last year they snuck up on a lot of teams. I think that they're going to be better defensively with having Mathurin back, having Neesmith, having Nembhard. I really dig this kid Mathurin. The fact that he was wasting away on that Celtic bench, it wasn't a travesty. And the reason why it wasn't a travesty, it was just sad. The reason why it wasn't a travesty was because you guys were loaded. So there wasn't any run for him there. That's why. It wasn't because he was getting the jerk job and, the coach didn't like him. No, it just wasn't any playing time for him. You had Jaylen Brown. You had Jason Tatum. You had Derek White. I'm sorry, there was no run for him there. That's not to say that he wasn't a great player. You see what happened when he goes to Indiana. He's a starter because there's playing time for him there. So I think that this Indiana team, I think that they're going to struggle in the aspect of them not sneaking up on anybody. I do think that they're going to win some games. Oh, 100%, because I think they have one of the better playmakers and distributors in the game in Tyrese Halliburton. His ability to get downhill and find guys without doing a lot. Like I watched Tyrese Halliburton. He doesn't do a lot of extracurricular nonsense to get guys to basketball. That's why Obi Toppin is going to play 5 more years, because he played with Tyrese Halliburton. I feel like Rick Carlisle expanded his game because he sped the game up and he played to a guy like Obi Toppin's strengths. And he was able, to the best of his ability with his wing defenders, he was able to hide or protect Obi Toppin as much as he possibly could. But I think that they're going to struggle off the strength. I feel like the Eastern Conference has gotten a lot better. And on top of the Eastern Conference getting better, I feel like they're not sneaking up on anybody, and teams are going to be more prepared for them, and they're going to have to guard more than they did last year. And I don't think they're going to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's understandable, and I think you definitely have a very valid point there. Another team that probably won't sneak up anybody, the New York Knicks, the Knickerbockers. Everybody's super high on the Knicks. Everybody's putting Jalen Brunson in MVP conversations. People are high after the Karl Anthony Towns acquisition. How much does Karl Anthony Towns move the needle for you?
Like, why are we talking about Cat? Like, Cat has just been balling in the playoffs. He hasn't been great in the playoffs. And you guys are talking about winning the NBA championship with a guy who's extremely unproven in the playoffs. Now, does that mean that he can't get busy in the playoffs? No, it doesn't mean that, because we've had guys who have had breakout seasons who have gotten better. But I think the Knicks are going to win a lot of games off the strength that with Jalen Brunson, with Mikal Bridges, with OG Anunoby. I feel like just off that wing defense that they have, I think that that's going to be a big deal. I don't like Cat at the 5. I don't. I've never liked Cat at the 5. I've always thought that he was the best at the 4. In fact, if you watched him last season, he had one of his better seasons playing the 4 alongside Rudy Gobert. He played the 4 coming out of college when he was at Kentucky. That's where he was at his best. Now, he's with the injury to Mitchell Robinson, he's going to have to go back to playing the 5, which means I'm going to have to deal with guys like Joker. I'm going to have to deal with guys like Embiid. I'm going to have to deal with Anthony Dick, guys like that. These are the guys that I'm going to have to deal with in terms of big guys. I'm going to have to deal with Bam. And I don't think that he wants to do. He's a stretch big whose game starts from the 15-foot line out, and then it moves in. That's who he is. Is he soft? Well, he has gotten the soft tag, and that's not going to work in New York. Not at all. But I do think that he helps them out a lot, because he gives them the amount of space that they need. And what I don't want to do, Ori, is I don't want to use the word space as a buzzword. What I mean when I say that is he gives them the amount of space playing at the 15-foot line and expanding the offense more than other guys would. I mean, Julius Randle can shoot. Cat's a shooter. Those two things are not the same. And I feel like with him doing that, right? With him doing that, I feel like he can expand their offense, because he can also get downhill to his detriment sometimes. I mean, this is the same guy. I think he led the league in charges last year as a big. So with that being said, he's got to be more careful with that. But I think the Knicks are going to make some noise. I'm not sure that they're going to be able to, if they got into a shootout with the Celtics, I'm not sure that they could handle that. I think this Knicks team, their offense, their team, I'm sorry, not their offense. I feel like their team is going to be predicated on the Tibbs way. A lot of grit, a lot of grind, a lot of dirty work.
And as much as I love that way, I always get nervous about exhaustion come playoff time. But you know, it can work. This team seems to have the cohesion that you would want. So the Cat's going to be an interesting mix-up. Moving down the line in the Eastern Conference, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Dame Lillard, Giannis Antetokounmpo experiment seemed to fail in year 1. I know that they were building, and our expectations were probably too high in the first place because they were just getting to know each other. But year 2's around. What kind of expectations should we have for the Bucks?
Well, last year I thought this was a 3-year window. And now it's a 2-year window. And I still think that the Bucks are fool's gold. I don't think that they have enough to protect Damian Lillard as a defender. I don't think he competes on the defensive end as much as he should. And if you're talking about winning the NBA championship, I don't think he competes on the defensive end. I don't think that you have to be Drew Holiday, right? I don't think you got to be Sidney Moncrief in order to win the NBA championship. Kyle Lowry never. These are how many all-league defensive teams Kyle Lowry made? None. But Kyle Lowry would compete on the defensive end. He 100% would compete on the defensive end. And I don't see that effort from Damian Lillard. He gets lost a lot of times. I got to watch him and Brook Lopez switch ones and fives, which is the biggest no-no in basketball. You don't switch a five-man with a one. No, unless you're Bam, because Bam can play 1 through 5, but Brook Lopez cannot. No, that's not the way that works. No, you don't want to. I don't want to have Brook Lopez 25 feet away from the basket on Tyrese Halliburton. I don't want that.
Right.
No, that's not going to work. Just like I don't want David Robinson 25 feet away from the basket on Kevin Johnson. I don't want that. As good as David Robinson is, no, you don't switch ones and fives. And I think that's what's going on because Damian Lillard, in terms of competing on the defensive end, I don't think that it's there. I think that they had an opportunity to shore that up this offseason, whether it was in a draft or in free agency with getting a legit big. I mean, I'm sorry, not a legit big, getting a legit wing defender, and they weren't able to do that. And I'm still not sure what they're doing with Beauchamp. I'm still not sure what they're doing with their other wing defenders. But I think the Milwaukee Bucks, they're going to win a lot of games in the East. That's why I think the Eastern Conference is going to be really tough this year. But come the playoffs, I think it's going to be tough on them because teams are going to specifically go after Damian Lillard. And I think that that's going to be where their Achilles heel is.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're one of those teams that could have a high ceiling, but if they disappointed again, it also wouldn't be surprising, I suppose.
Nope.
That's fair. That's fair. Moving down the line to a team that always seems to chill in mediocrityville. The Atlanta Hawks had the #1 pick. In the preseason, he's looked good. That combination, Trae Young, Jalen Johnson getting a little more run. What kind of view do you have for the Hawks? Do you think they're a team that could compete for a play-in spot, or is this another mediocre season?
The play-in tournament is absolutely a mediocre season, and that's where they'll be again. I don't see them as one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. I think that's exactly what they are at best. And because of that, that's where they'll be. And over the last 5 years, with the exception of them being in the East Finals in 21, over the last 5 years, Ori, 9th, 10th, 9th, 8th, 9th. With the exception of 21, that's where they've been. They've been a mediocre team, and I actually like Quinn Snyder as a coach. I think he's one of the better coaches in the game. I think he runs really good schemes offensively. I think his adjustments defensively could be a little bit sketchy, but I actually like the way he develops point guards. I think he was really good with Mike Conley. I thought he was really good with Donovan Mitchell, even though Donovan Mitchell isn't a league guard, but I thought he was really good with Donovan Mitchell. With that being said, I mean, they got a lot of young guys. As good as Jalen Johnson is, as good as this kid Rishishier is, who looks really good early, I think it's going to be a struggle in the Eastern Conference. I think they're a play-in team.
Yeah, it should be interesting. It's got to be tough for Atlanta fans because, like you said, they had that blip where they showed like they could play, they could compete, and then since then, I mean, just is it not so much a Quinn Snyder thing as maybe it's a Trae Young thing, or is that maybe putting too much on Trae Young?
Well, they brought the same unit back after they went to the East Finals in 21. They just essentially ran it back, which that works if you're the Boston Celtics and you win in the NBA championship. All right, beat us. I can get with that. Sure, we won it. We won the whole thing. Beat us. But when you get to the East Finals, I'm being honest with you, Rory. I'm going to say on the fluke. They had no business losing to Philly. They had no business beating Philly. None whatsoever. Philly should have beat them. So you end up in the East Finals, and if Giannis doesn't get hurt, they mop them in 5 games. That series is over in 4 or 5 games tops. So now this was probably the peak of that team in particular. So what I'm not going to do is run it back when the rest of the East is going to get better. But they ran it back, and they went right back to where they were. right back.
Mhm.
In terms of style of play, they didn't know what they were doing with John Collins. One minute you got him in the post, the next minute you got him playing in the mid post, the next minute you got him playing on the wing. There isn't anything in terms of versatility that we can stamp. Okay, he's this good here, so we're going to keep him here, but he's also good here too. So I didn't know what they were doing with him, and on top of that, he stayed on the trade block, which now mentally I got to worry about that. In addition to me trying to play, you got Trey Young. And then they trade for DeJounte Murray, which that
Yes,
didn't work.
that's okay. Tell me, from your perspective, what were the flaws immediately in that trade? Like Dejounte Murray and Trey Young, what were the Hawks seeing that maybe no one else saw?
Well, I think one of the things that they saw was DeJounte Murray as a defender in the backcourt. Because when he was in San Antonio, he was actually a solid defender. He was. But and he played off excuse me, and he played off the ball a lot in San Antonio. But he's also a guy who needs the ball.
Mm,
Trey Young is ball dominant. Trey Young isn't very good off the basketball. So those two things didn't mesh between those two. And when DeJounte Murray got to Atlanta, he wasn't as good defensively as he could have been. He didn't play very good off the ball. He was a solid on-ball defender, and his shot selection was iffy. And the reason why his shot selection was iffy was because his point guard, his shot selection
mhm,
was iffy. So a lot of times when I got a guy who I can't get in a rhythm because he's shooting the basketball, and then I got to get my shots too, it kind of leads to some discontent with the unit. And that's what was going on with DeJounte Murray and Trey Young. So you got two guys who need the ball, two guys who aren't good quality shot takers, and you got one guy who's deficient in defense and another guy who's maybe a little bit above average. No, that's not a recipe for disaster. It
mm.
just didn't work. Mm-mm.
Yeah, for sure. Now, talking about maybe I don't want to sound insulting, but we're getting closer to the bottom of the barrel here for the Eastern Conference. I mean, anybody in that, from Brooklyn, Charlotte, Chicago, Washington, any surprises we should expect out of those guys potentially?
I like the direction that Washington is going in, if I'm being honest, since we're being
Mhm,
honest. And the reason why is because Washington is a basketball city, and I feel like they may have a core of this kid Sar, this kid Bub Harrington, and Bilal Kubalabi. And I actually like the direction that they're going in. Okay, we have a foundation that we can build on. And in the future, we can add to these pieces, with Bilal being a lead guard, Bub being one of their better guards, and Sar, who I think, this might be a hot take, but I actually think that Sar, I think he could be a rim protector equivalent to Rudy Gobert. I think he could be that good as a rim protector.
okay.
I watched him in the summer league, and it's a lot of raw talent there, but he looked like a guy who just knows how to be around the rim.
Mm,
You got a guy who knows how to be around the rim. Or I could teach you a lot of stuff. I can't teach you how to run fast and jump high, and that's
yeah.
him. And he's
Yep.
got that in his game. And I see the defensive potential in him. So I like those guys as a foundation. Brooklyn, if we're being honest, since we're being honest, I mean, they're in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. They don't have a franchise player. They
Yeah.
don't. They don't have a
Mhm,
franchise player. Because they don't have a franchise player, they got to get one. If you have any of these teams that have built something, they've had something to build around.
mhm,
The Brooklyn Nets don't. They're not building around Claxton. They're not building around Cam Thomas. They're not. They don't have. They're not. The Ben Simmons experiment. It was a disaster.
mm.
So they have to get a franchise player. I don't think Charlotte is that far away. They're LaMelo Ball staying healthy from competing in the East.
Okay, so that's interesting. So maybe of all the bunch, do you think that Charlotte potentially has the highest ceiling?
I do. I like what I see from Brandon Miller. I thought that he would be good last year, which he was. Some people were down on him in the summer league. I was one of those people because he did look lost. But I thought that once he got with LaMelo, the game would open up a little bit for him. How much better he would be in stop and pop and in transition, and he was, and it
Mm,
actually helped. But what happens is LaMelo Ball goes down. I'm watching this kid Salon in preseason, and to be honest with you, Ori, I don't really watch much preseason basketball. But I
sure.
watched I watched some of this kid, and he looks like a player. He does.
Mm,
He looks like a player. So Anybody who knows me knows how I feel about Mark Williams. I think that's the New York Knicks starting center. They made a mistake passing on him.
Mhm.
So with Mark Williams and LaMelo Ball staying healthy, with this kid Brandon Miller, and now you got Bridges back. I think I think that if LaMelo Ball can stay healthy, I think they could compete in the East.
You think they're in a much better position than the Atlanta Hawks?
I do. Yes,
Yeah.
I do. I do.
Okay.
Yes, I
Fair
do.
enough. Fair enough.
Yep.
Now, I want to get into the Western Conference a little bit. The West is going to be a gauntlet. I mean, it has been for the last few years. We know
Yep.
that everybody is sold on OKC. Are you sold on OKC?
I'm not. And I'm not saying that I'm not sold on them. I don't think that they're whack or anything like that. No, I just think they're probably a year away from
Mhm.
really challenging for the NBA championship. I don't think that they're there yet. And I put them in the same neighborhood, not in the same house. I put them in the same neighborhood with the Indiana Pacers off the strength that they're not sneaking up on anybody. Or we're talking about a play-in team the year before that went from a play-in team to adding Chet to being the #1 seed.
Mm.
Okay, so now you guys are the 100. You're not. There are no nights off for you guys. None. Everybody's aware of who you are. So you're not going to magically just have 50 wins. Like, oh, yo, Oklahoma City. No, I mean you have a star in SGA. I think you have I think you got another star in Chet. I think this kid Jalen. I think J Dub. I think he could be the most improved player. I think he's got to play at an all-star level in order for that to happen. I think he can
Mm.
get there. I really like their rotation guys, but I feel like with what they have in terms of Hartenstein, Alex Caruso, I think their team is going to be built on defense a lot. I just don't think they're there yet. I think that they're a year away, not a year away from getting another player, because I don't think that they need anybody else. I just think
Sure.
I just think that they're a year away from really challenging for the NBA championship.
Yes. So basically, like in a playoff situation, you see that maybe they need a little more experience to genuinely be a contender.
Yes, I do think that.
Okay.
I'm watching them last year, and I watched them against New Orleans. I'm thinking to myself, the Lakers would have beat them in the first round.
Mm.
I think that the Lakers would have beaten them off the strength of who they were, just as an older bunch,
Mhm.
just as a more experienced bunch. Because I saw, late in the game, they had faltered. I'm thinking if they went up against a vet unit, they would have exposed that. And
Mhm.
I think they got lucky in the aspect of having some favorable matchups. And I what I won't do is I won't downgrade that.
Yeah.
I don't look at that, because that's what the playoffs is about. It's about getting lucky and getting some favorable matchups. But
Mhm.
I think Oklahoma City, I think that they're a year away. I don't think they're that far away though. I don't. And
Not
I
that
don't
far
want to
away.
mess with this unit neither, Ori. I don't want to, like, if they don't win it, like if they end up in the West Finals or if they end up in the semis again, I don't want to
Mhm.
throw a monkey wrench in this and trade this guy. No, you
Yeah.
guys are
No.
right there. You ain't that
No
far away.
tinkering. Yeah.
No, you guys are there. You're not that
Yeah.
far away. Stick with this group.
Fair enough. I like that. I do like the prospects, but I tend to agree that the experience does make a big deal.
Hmm.
Denver, obviously a team with a lot of experience. They added Russell Westbrook to the mix.
Hmm.
Um, Nikola Jokic is a year older.
Hmm.
This team's expectations are going to be high once again. Do you see them meeting expectations, or do you think that Denver might be slightly on the decline?
Well, what I talked about when I talked about Milwaukee, when I said that they were fool's gold, but what I failed to mention was I got to give them a shot because they arguably have the best player in the world on their team.
Mm.
I have to give them that off the strength that they got Giannis. And when you have arguably the best player in the world on your team, yeah, there's not much that you can't do because he makes up for so much when you have a guy that good. Well, I feel the same way about Denver. They got the best player in the league on their team. So just off the strength of them having the best player in the league on their team, they got a legit shot at getting back to the NBA championship. Just off that alone. And I think that with having Michael Porter Jr. back healthy, I'll be interested to see if Jamal Murray is healthy. If we can get these guys to stay healthy, and when I say stay healthy, I don't mean completely healthy, because any of these teams, you're banged up in the playoffs. Nobody is in the
Mm.
playoffs completely fully healthy. Nah, the Celtics, you guys weren't fully healthy. I mean, as much as you miss KP, JB was banged up. Jason Tatum was banged up. Drew Holiday was banged up. All of these guys were banged up. It's just a matter of how you were able to sustain those injuries. And are you okay being able to perform through those injuries? I feel like with Jamal Murray, if he can play through this stuff and get back to what he was 2 years ago when him and Joker were arguably the best two-man tandem in the game, I think they're right back in the middle of it.
Right back in the mix.
Right back in the middle of it.
Okay. Now we move down the line. We get a team like you mentioned, Minnesota, a team that's going to look new with Julius Randle in the mix. We talked about Cat moving the needle for the Knicks. How does Julius Randle move the needle for the Timberwolves?
Well, he gives them some toughness that they didn't have. He gives them another playmaker that they didn't have. He gives them a scorer when they lose Cat. He gives them a bucket getter. A lot of people don't want to talk about this, and I think I mentioned this to you in the past, Ori. So in the 22-23 season, Julius Randle threw 151 passes, 156 passes out of the paint for threes. The Knicks converted on 51% of those. That's good enough for numero uno in the league. Giannis was behind him. So Julius Randle will get off the ball. He will make plays. He will pass the ball. And when he gets into the paint, because he's such a good player around that area, that collapses the defense. And when you got a guy who will get off the ball, that's going to enhance Mike Conley. That's going to enhance Alexander Walker. That's going to enhance DiVincenzo. That's going to enhance Naz Reid. I think the difference with this Minnesota team, Anthony Edwards, if he can get that in-between game, it's kind of like what's going on with the Sacramento Kings. I watched them a couple of nights in preseason, and I'm watching DeMar DeRozan play in between, and I'm thinking to myself, that's what they need right there, because they already had the long ball. They already play fast. They got Sabonis. If they could get that in-between game, they could really be competitive. If Anthony Edwards can get that consistent in-between game, I got the Minnesota Timberwolves as favorites in the Western Conference.
Favorites in the West.
Yes, I do.
That's big. That's big. That'd be huge for that franchise. That'd be absolutely huge to see them finally make that. The next mix is kind of the young versus old. You mentioned Sacramento. I'm putting them in a group with Houston. Sacramento and Houston versus Golden State and the Lakers. And new versus old. Where would you lean between those squads and where they go this season?
Anybody that knows me has heard me rave about the Houston Rockets. I think they're a top 5 seed in the West. I think they're a 50-plus win team this year. I think Ime Udoka has instilled the discipline in this unit that they didn't have in the past. I think he's instilled the toughness in them that they didn't have and some accountability that they didn't have. That's why I think that they're going to be a lot better. They have, in the words of my man Marlo Stansfield from The Wire, they have one of those good problems. They got a log jam at the forward spot with Cam Whitmore and Jabari Smith and Eason and Amin Thompson. They got a log jam there, but that's a good thing because I got a bunch of versatile guys too. And I'm looking for Cam Whitmore to come back better. And when I say come back better, I think it's understanding of the game, understanding when to shoot, when to get other guys involved, being a better defender. The problem was when he went down to the G League, there wasn't really a lot of run for him because they had a log jam at the forward spot. Now, with that being said, I think they're going to be one of the better defensive teams in the game. I love Sengun. I think he's one of the better bigs in the game. Him and Jalen Green. I saw maturity in Jalen Green's game. It didn't look like that early on because he was in a transition. He went from Steven Silas. He went from Steven Silas and the frat house to Ime Udoka and go clean up your room. This is what time dinner is. This is what time you got to go to school. He went from this to that, and he struggled a bit, but he started to get it down. He started to get it down, and I saw the progression in his game. And I think that progresses onto this season, which would explain why they are yet to sign him to an extension because they need to see it, but I think it'll be there.
Sure. Now, we move down the line. I want to make sure I touch on these guys. The San Antonio Spurs, naturally, they have Wemby. The GMs voted, said Wemby's the best defender down low. Wendy's the best defender in the game. Wemby is that guy. We all know that. But how good is this? How good is this team? Well, maybe.
I think what we do with guys like Wemby is we want him to be something that he's not yet. And Wemby's got to be the best player in the league in year 3. Like, he can't be the best player in the league in year 6. No, that's too late. He's got to be the best player in the league in year 3. Like, he can't be the best defensive player in the league in year 4. He's got to be the best defensive player in the league now. When I watch Wemby, he's got a lot of flaws in his game, a lot, in terms of his post defense, his ability to shot block. That's gonna get better. His paint presence. I always equated, when I watch Wemby, he's the big, you know that big kid in the yard with a bunch of small kids who doesn't really know how to control himself. Like, he's knocking over the small kids when the parent comes in like, hey, relax. And then he understands how to be around them. That's kind of how I see Wemby. He's one of those guys who he's just not really sure what he's doing yet. But once he figures it out, I mean, I think him and Evan Mobley, I think, are going to be the class of the defense of the defense in the NBA. I think that the NBA is going to be a bunch of Wembys and Evan Mobley, a bunch of 6'10" to 7'4" guys running around that glass clean, that throw the ball between their legs and shoot the three, and that are elite defenders. But I think we're trying to turn this guy into something that he's not yet. I think he's going to be that. But I think because he was the number 1 overall pick, he's the best prospect since LeBron. He's got to be that right now. Actually, no, he doesn't. No, Wemby could be the best player in the league in year 5. That's okay. Mm-hmm. And he could be the best player in the league for 10 more years after that. I don't think that that's a problem. Wemby could be the best defensive player in the game in year 4 and be the best defensive player arguably in the game for the next decade. I don't see the issue with that. I don't understand why he's got to be the best defensive player in the game right now, when clearly he's not ready to be that. You guys are saying that he's ready to be that. No, I don't think so. Not yet.
Yeah, and that puts a unique amount of pressure on him that, I mean, you would know better than I, but I know when a player deals with those certain levels of pressure, it either makes or breaks you, I'm sure. And given how much hype was behind Wemby, like, we got to let him grow naturally. We got to let him grow naturally. Sure.
I look at the Spurs team, Ori. I think that people are expecting more than is realistic. I mean, adding Harrison Barnes, I think that's a big deal. But we can't leave out the fact Chris Paul's going to be 40 years old in February. I mean, how much are you realistically asked? If you're being realistic, what are you getting? What do you think you're getting for Chris Paul? Because you're not getting the dude from Oklahoma City 5 years ago. You're not. That's not happening. I'm telling you that right now. You're not getting that guy. That's not happening. And he's broken down when he was in Golden State. He broke down when he was in Phoenix. And he's now older. Now, is he going to be able to show Devin Vassell? Is he going to be able to show Stephon Castle? He's going to be able to show these guys how to play? Yes, 100% he is. But, Ori, I don't know if you know this, my man, but the Golden State Warriors and the Sacramento Kings both won 46 games last year. That wasn't enough to get in the play-in. That wasn't enough to get in the playoffs. That wasn't. So you're telling me that the San Antonio Spurs, who won 22 games last year, they got to win almost 30 more games in order to get in the playoffs. If they're doing that, and that's off the strength of Wemby, Wemby's the league MVP.
Yeah, I mean, naturally with that type of context, that's exactly true, and it makes it sound a little more ridiculous. I mean, them gaining that much based on the moves that they made. Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see it. All right, so ending out here, I had a little game for you. I play a little game with everybody at the end, just to try to get some opinions, maybe some hot takes, maybe some fun things. With you, I wanted to go with some history. We're playing a game. This is called Peak for Peak. Now, what we have here are going to be just a couple players. I'm going to name 2 guys in a situation, and I just want to know, peak for peak, which player you would choose in that particular situation. Simple as that. So to start off, at their peak, who was more clutch in the NBA playoffs? Chauncey Billups or Paul Pierce?
Well, Mr. Big Shot is not a self-proclaimed name. So let's get to the bottom of that right there. He didn't just name himself that. He did that because he was able to come up with some big shots and make some big-time plays when they were in the playoffs. I mean, they were on the verge of getting swept by the Nets, and he hits a buzzer beater to send the game in overtime, and they end up winning, and they end up prevailing. As good as Paul Pierce was in the playoffs, I'd have to go with Chauncey Billups
Chauncey.
as more clutch. And it's not. I don't think it's just about making shots, because a lot of people think clutch is just making shots. No, I think Chauncey Billups competed on the defensive end. Paul Pierce competed on the defensive end also. But when I think about what Chauncey Billups did with that Detroit Pistons team and how he competed on the defensive end and kept that team under control when we got into the meat and potatoes of games, yeah, I would have to say Chauncey Billups.
Chauncey Billups. I like it. I
Mhm.
like it. All right. At their best, who do you consider a better all-around scorer? Bernard King or Adrian Dantley? I know.
Bernard
I
King.
I, I got OG on. I had to be fun. All right.
Bernard
Bernard
King.
King.
Yes, Bernard
Yeah.
King. Because I felt like he just did more one on. I mean, Dantley was methodical with his game and where he operated. Dantley could play on the block. I mean, a smaller guy who could play on the block in the big man league. But Bernard King just had so many things that he could get to, so many spots that he could get to, and he was so versatile in his game. I think he was a little bit more versatile than Adrian Dantley as an overall scorer.
A
I
little
might have
more
to say
versatile.
Bernard
Bernard
King.
King.
Mhm.
All right. I like that one. How about more underrated shot creator, Glenn Rice or Michael Redd?
I don't think Michael Redd was an underrated shot creator. I think he was a good long ball shooter. Um, I think he was a good one-on-one player, but I mean, Glenn Rice, he didn't have a lot in his bag, but what he did have in his bag, it was
Mm,
incredible. I mean,
yeah,
at 6'8", he knew the spots that it was almost like if a cross between Carmelo Anthony and Bernard King in the aspect where he knew the spots to get to and he knew how to raise up over you. He could get to the rim with the best of them. He had a money mid-range game and he was
mhm.
fantastic. He was fantastic in that. He had a great three ball. I would have to say Glenn Rice.
Right, man. He's one of those guys too that I know would have translated today,
Mhm.
big time with the way that the 3-point game's played.
Yep.
And speaking of 3-pointers and offensive weapons, who do you consider a more unique offensive weapon at their peak? Rashard Lewis or Peja Stojakovic?
Rashard Lewis, and I don't think it's a question. The reason why I say that
Yeah.
is because in the early 2000s, we did start to see the influx of the Euro. But a 6'10" long ball shooter like Rashard Lewis,
Mhm.
that wasn't common. Mm-mm. That was not something that was going on. A guy who was that good at the long ball line, he was definitely ahead of his time. No doubt about it,
Mhm.
was what Rashard Lewis was. That was something that was really unique. And he wasn't just a long ball shooter. He could get to the rim too.
Yeah.
But the fact that he could shoot the long ball at 6'10" like that and pull up like that, yeah, that was not something that was going on the regular in the NBA. No. Mm-mm.
Man, that team with him and Ray Allen, they were a fun team to watch. Just
Yes.
and another team that probably would have been better in today's spacing. You need you're depending on this guy to be your defensive anchor. Peak for peak, Marcus Camby or Tyson Chandler.
I think Chandler was better at the rim than Marcus Camby. I think Marcus Camby was more versatile than Tyson Chandler. I think he
Mm,
was a better rebounder too than Tyson Chandler. Because I think that Marcus Camby, he came from the big man era, so he knew how to play like a big man. Tyson Chandler knew how to play like a big man, but the league was going in a different direction at that time. So, you had the big man who was stepping out a little bit more and playing more on the perimeter because the big man was even though, Shaq was still around, Duncan was still around, but the league was in a transition. Marcus Camby was growing up in the 90s where the big man played on the block, the big man played in the paint, the big man cleaned glass. He knew how to protect the rim. Even though I think that Tyson Chandler did that also, I think Marcus Camby was better at it
yeah,
overall as a defender.
fair enough. And
Mhm.
last one, we're gonna end with defense because defense wins championships. You need a versatile wing defender, peak for peak. You going with Ron Artest, meta world peace to some, to all, or Bruce Bowen.
Bruce Bowen off the strength that I know that Bruce Bowen is going to keep his head straight. I might
Fair
lose.
enough.
I might lose Ronnie. Not that not that he wasn't better. I might lose him, and I can't risk that.
That makes as much sense as any reason,
Yeah,
man. I appreciate you, Chilltown. We got to get out of here. This has been
absolutely,
a
brother.
great talking to you, man. Thank you for your time. Everybody that's in the comments, we appreciate you guys hanging out with us today.
Absolutely.
And this has been the Creator Hour, and I hope you guys all have an excellent rest of your night. This is where legends reminisce. Let's
Mhm.
go.